Well, where should I begin? With the start of a new year, I always find myself with an urge to do something that I've been putting off. It's something about that fresh start where I just want to cross things off the list that have been there for the past year, and I just want them to not be there for the new one. The start of 2021 gave me this urge just as much as any of the years gone before. And thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Keep your ears open because we'll be learning more about their all-in-one platform for building websites later on. My particular excitement for this cross things off came in the form of cleaning and organizing my sewing closet. It's been around a year since I last did it, and since then, more fabric and supplies and just stuff has been added, and it has continually gone downhill as far as organizing goes. So with that determination into the new year, I went pulling out all the things acquired in the past and very satisfactorily piling them in the sewing room, not even thinking about the certain projects I needed to do in the coming weeks because of course I'd have it all done by then. So I'm so energized, I'm ready to take on the world. This is going to get so organized, yes, and a swatch book is going to be made of my fabric. I am ready. A few days later. New Year's blues, let me tell you. So there all my junk sat, filling up the floor, the tables, the wherever there was space for anything for more than a few days. But with a need to at least walk into the room, never mind the fact that I needed to film a video, I begrudgingly climbed in and started sorting. So without further talking about my energy that can so easily slip away, let's look at how I plan to organize my closet and make my swatch book. Surprisingly, in those few lazy days, I did actually manage to do something productive. I opened my computer, typed in Amazon.com, and spent money on practical things. That was the hard part. I got cardboard, binders, and file inserts. The plans for the cardboard involve undoing all my fabric bolts and re-rolling them onto this cardboard. And the binders and the file inserts are for my swatch book. Something I am really excited about. I've always wanted to do this and I'm finally going to do it. I'll be doing both of these tasks, re-rolling my fabric and making the swatch book kind of in tandem. I'll show you what I'm doing. All right, so I just wanted to take a minute to explain what my organizing process is going to be as far as how I'm going to store my fabric. So the first thing to remember when looking at your area that you want to keep your fabric or whatever, one system doesn't fit all. And I think that was a mistake that I made when I was originally organizing my fabric about a year ago. I thought the best way to organize fabric was to keep them on the bolts, because this would keep them wrinkle-free and all organized together. They all looked the same kind of thing. And so that is what I originally planned my organizing process around. And then I had all my tiny pieces, like less than a few yards, in these baskets here organized. And As I was working with this closet arrangement for about a year, I realized I really need to switch things up because it just was inefficient. One of the main reasons is my closet shelves don't fit a longer sized bolt. So these are shorter bolts here. They are 45-inch fabric folded in half, and they fit great along like this. But my bigger bolts, like this, which is about 60-inch fabrics, which I have quite a few of, they do not fit in here. As you can see, they don't fit. And so I had to store these up higher where I had that room to fit them like that. And even though that worked, and technically it was fine, I realized that a lot of my regularly used fabrics were on these bigger bolts, and to have to reach up high like this all the time was just kind of hazardous. And then also the fact that how I'm storing them is stacked one on top of each other, and so if I wanted to get the bottom fabric bolt, it just took a lot of maneuvering to get it out. And of course that was easy because there's only 2 bolts. But just with how much I looked through my fabric to see what I had, or I also had a bunch of fabric just folded up, like my 5-yard pieces, and stacked on a shelf here. Again, they were all stacked one on top of each other. And so after a year of that, I needed to revamp and do something different. And so I've decided to use my cardboard pieces and fold my fabrics in half. So this is actually in quarters. So on a bolt, it's folded in half with one folded edge with them all going down. But what I'm doing with these is folding them in half and creating quarters basically and rolling them up on these pieces. So this solves 2 problems. I can now store them upright like so and get to each fabric easier. Second of all, it goes deeper back into the shelf. My shelves are really deep, and so what I found I was doing is storing a bunch of random stuff behind all these bolts, and to get to it was challenging and annoying, but also it just was inefficient because this is only taking up about 12 inches of this probably 30-inch deep shelf. And so it just was inefficient. Whereas this will take up quite a bit of the shelf, and they're standing up straight, which I love, and I just really like the look of that. So that solves all my bolt problems. Now, the other issue that I was working through was all my about 5-yard pieces stacked up here and my remnant pieces stacked here. And so I originally folded them like this, which is different the lengthwise as these, which I realized it's better to keep everything fairly uniform as in how I'm storing them. And so I'll be redoing these to look like this and folding them the shorter way around, if that makes sense. And I will be doing the same thing where I stack them like this along here. Now I came into another problem because this shelf is shorter than this one, and so I'll be cutting down my cardboard pieces to be the correct height so I can have those smaller pieces on these smaller shelves. Now another thing that I wanted to solve was the remnant pieces. I will still be using my basket system because I just really like the look of it, and also they're just easy to pull out and see what you have. And this, I was going back and forth whether I wanted my like rounded edges to be on the outside so it looks pretty like these, but I realized that it's more efficient for these smaller pieces to be folded with that rounded edge here. And so I can pull this out and easily see my different fabrics that I have. And so these baskets will mainly be for my like 1 to 2 yard and larger scrap pieces of fabric. And then I have them organized based on fabric type. So basically the same, but I am using cardboard on them to keep them more straight up and just easier to dig through and look at. So anyway, that's what I'm doing, and I'm going to go finish organizing all my different fabric bolts and fabric pieces, and I'll show you the process of doing that quickly. First off, I cut off pieces from each of my fabrics. The size of these varied. I plan to straighten them up all later, but I do want at least a 2-inch square. And as you can see, I'm using pinking scissors. After I got pieces from all my fabric, I am now going to organize and straighten these swatches up. As for how I plan to organize my swatches, my method is somewhat normal, but I'm also going to mix it up a little bit. I'm doing a basic sort of fiber content, so cotton, silk, wools, linens, and polyesters. Within each of these groups, I'll be sorting by the type of fabrics, so sheers or heavyweights, or in the silks, the taffetas versus satins. All my natural fibers will be in one binder and the poly and poly blends in another. So fairly straightforward, though there's a few places such as my holy fabric, aka nettings and things of that sort, and my velvets are all on one page, and I'm mixing both natural fibers and the poly of these fabric types. So my poly velvets and silk velvets and cotton velveteens, it's all in one page. So the reason for this, velvets and nettings are very particular fabrics. It's not one that I just go randomly pick something out. When I decide I need a velvet or netting of some sort, I just want to see all that I have of that very distinct fabric. I don't want to go into one binder for the cotton ones and another page for the silk and another one for the poly. I just want them all right there so I can see what I'm working with. So why am I going into such detail on explaining this tiny little detail? Well, it's to illustrate a broader point. When creating a swatch book, or for that matter, just organizing fabric, you need to do it how you will best use it. You know how your brain works. You know best how you look for fabric or to get inspired for a personal project, because personally, I will definitely be flipping through the swatch books for the express purpose of getting inspired to do a project that I have no plans for and is a complete whim, but never mind. Organizing in a way that will best serve you is the goal. There's not a one way fits all. My method may drive you crazy. You might need to be completely sorted by color, so all the fibers are mixed up, but like all the oranges are together, etc. So think through your process of finding fabric for a project and all that, and organize your fabric and your swatch book around that process. And that will be your, what's the word? Sweet spot. There you go. So anyway, let's move on. With how I plan to organize my swatch book, I decided to go with 2 1/4 inch squares for my swatches, just because the 2 inches seemed a little small, and this was the largest I could go because I cut it a bit close in some of my hasty gathering of the swatches. Now for arranging the book, I am splitting the area of the file inserts up into fourths by drawing 3 horizontal lines with a fine Sharpie, and then placing my swatches like so on each of the pages. Then some hot glue to secure them in place. I was originally planning on placing glue just on the top edge of the swatch, but as I played with the pages, the swatches very easily just like flipped up and got wrinkled, and they just weren't staying in place. And I knew that would be frustrating to me. So I started gluing a second edge of the swatch, and that seems to be solving that problem of them like flipping all over. But it still allows me to lift up a corner of the fabric to get a feel for it, because that's what I want in a swatch book. Also, hot glue might not be the best option. A double-sided tape would not be as bulky, and just hot glue isn't my favorite thing in the world, but it's what I decided to use, and it worked. Now, I started out my arrangements with just 4 swatches per file insert, but with how many swatches I have, which directly corresponds with how much fabric I own, this way of doing it was just taking up way too many file inserts. So I switched it up a little, and for my, what should you call them? Not important, will rarely ever be used, or will only be used for a very specific project, or I only have a couple yards of it. That basically describes my entire fabric stash. Anyway, I filled my pages putting 2 or 3 swatches on each line of the page, so a lot more swatches per page. Placing 3 swatches per line didn't give me a blank space to write out my fabric specifications, so I'll just be lifting up one of the corners of the swatch and writing those specs underneath the swatch. Once I got all these swatches placed on the pages and in the binders, I am now going to re-roll all my fabric. And while I'm doing it, I will be measuring the fabric and writing down those specifications in the swatch book, because I That's what I wanted in a swatch book. I wanted to be able to look and see, this is how many yards I have of this fabric, this is what I can do with it, kind of thing. A note on the cardboard pieces that I bought. I need to trim them down a bit to a size that works well for my shelves. So using my cutting mat and a box cutter, be careful, don't want an emergency. Tip to help with that, angle the direction of the cut away from your body. So if your hand wielding the knife slips, it doesn't, come into contact with anything valuable. So after carefully doing that, by the way, I won't be throwing away these little bits of trimmings. I'll use them later. So now I can start that rolling process. My chosen method of keeping the ends of fabric in place in storage, I first folded the raw edge under a few inches, and then I placed a paper clip within the fold, attaching it to the edges of the previously rolled fabric. I did this on both edges of the piece. So this is proving to work quite well. I don't like pinning the fabric, and tape isn't great either. I can't stand the gumminess it sometimes leaves behind on the fabric. So for now, paper clips seem to be the answer. They seem to be holding up well. So this is taking way longer than I thought it would. But finally, everything has been re-rolled, even the ones that I'm not rolling onto a new piece of cardboard, because I just wanted to know how much I had of them, so that meant re-rolling and then re-rolling it on the same thing. But now on to some other organizing bits. Using those set-aside cardboard scraps, I'm cutting them up a bit more to create the perfect size pieces for my lace, because my lace has kind of got all messy. So with that, I think we've covered enough organizing information, or at least that's all I've done thus far. The rest of the closet is actually not in too bad of shape, and I can easily find what I need to when I need to. So far I've been referencing my fabric as all my fabric, but the one issue of making a swatch book is you have all your numbers of yards written down, and if you're curious, you add up all those numbers to see how many yards of fabric you own, and then you kind of want to crawl into a hole of shame. I own over 1,000 yards of fabric. I probably shouldn't be telling you this because that is like so embarrassing. And the worst part about it is a majority of it I have had around for more than 5 years. Like I would guess, over half of it I've had in my life for 5 years and I have not touched it. So, have you ever thought about building a website? Maybe you have, but maybe it scares you a bit, and justly so. It's a lot. But with Squarespace, you can jump into your dream of building a website, whether that be for e-commerce, a portfolio, blog, or membership platform. It's up to you. You can make a stunning website with Squarespace by your side with their easy-to-use features and excellent designs. So if you're ready to start that dream website of yours, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/BellaMazeDesigns, or at the checkout, enter code BellaMazeDesigns to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So get on there and you'll find it so easy to make some website magic. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you maybe took away some tips and inspiration for your own fabric organizing and storage and swatch book making, which is going to be so nice. I know it. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons who continually support my adventures, as small as they may be. So if you'd like to learn more about Patreon, the link will pop up or here. And now go into your own sewing area and learn, create, and inspire. And maybe don't go be so ambitious that you leave your room a disaster for many days because you had a quickly fading burst of energy. But it did get it done. So maybe there's a plus to that.